So, thank you for the opportunity. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Yes. So, with 2020 and all its jinxing and its bad events, one of the worst things that happened was the Australian bushfire. And now I'm going to present a case which mimicked this quite a bit. So, this was a 32-year-old healthy man. He presented to us with diminished vision in the right eye since 8 days. He didn't give any history of a fever, no flashes of floaters, no systemic illness. Right eye vision was 3 by 60 and the left was 6 by 9, and there was no anterior segment inflammation or vitreous cells. So this was his right eye. We can see that there is an area here superiorly, an extensive area of healing, and there are these fresh lesions at the margin of this healing. Also, there is this um, penumbra of fresh lesions surrounding an area of atrophy. The AF is very impressive because it shows up the fresh margins even better than the fundus photo. This is the OCT. We can see that the scan passing through the healed area has a collapse of the outer layers, and the scan passing through the active area has this kind of RP thickening and some expansion of the outer retinal layers over here. This is the left eye, and this is again the active margin, and which is kind of limiting the old healed areas. Left eye macula looked okay. There were some vitreous cells, however, and again in left eye in the active areas had this RP thickening. So this was a young man. He had healed lesions in the periphery already, and there was acute onset blurring of vision. So our differentials were serpiginous like chordopathy, probably tubercular. Serpiginous also was one of the differentials, and syphilitic plecoid chorioretinopathy was one differential which also seemed possible in this case. So we worked up for infectious causes of posterior uveitis. Admittedly, we just did a VDRL. We didn't do a TPHA. The rest of the investigations looked fine, as in the MON2 was negative, the chest X-ray was pristine. He was started on oral steroids 1 milligram per kg body weight. This was in February 2020. Unfortunately, the patient could come back only after a month because of the COVID scare. And right eye vision had now dropped to counting finger, and the left eye had dropped to 612. Now there were some anterior vitreous cells in the left eye. This is the right eye now. It has the margin of the activity has increased considerably, and there are these new lesions here, if you can see the cursor, which have cropped up like satellite lesions. So this is the montage. This is the right eye comparison from 1 month ago of the AF. And this, I didn't know about this. This is apparently the described cockade sign, which means that this lesion, which has three zones of a central hypoautofluorescence and a surrounding thin sliver of hyperauto, and then again a dark area, is looks like a cockade that we wear in our conferences as badges. So this is a cockade, and this is the OCT line scan passing through the active area where there is an expanded choroidal lesion, which is suggestive of inflammation. There is a RP thickening overlying it. Again, there is the outer retinal layers that is showing hyperreflectivity. So this is an active area with backshadowing due to the double layering of the RP or the thickening of the RP. This is the left eye. Again, this cockade has graduated to become much worse than before. This is the left eye montage after a month. And this is a very nice OCT finding over an active area where there is, apart from the RP thickening, this sort of very obvious like expansion of the outer nuclear and the outer plexiform layer, and a sliver of this is not a sliver, but yeah, it is kind of a well seen hyporeflectivity in the outer retinal layers above the ellipsoid zone and the ELM. So here we see a comparison where these are the new lesions, and here there was no lesion a month ago. Now we did an HRCT, and we found that he had some areas of scarring and a fibrotic band in the lower lungs, lower lobe of the lung. So he was started on AKT4 under steroid cover in March 2020. Now again there was lockdown imposed all over the country, so he returned after I think 6 weeks, or it was again a month later. Now his left eye was only 3 by 60, and this was despite anti-tubercular treatment. And now you can see that the lesions have really progressed far beyond the inferior arcade as well in the right eye. This is the montage of the right eye, which shows these active margins have come to the inferior fundus now, and we can see what the fire has left behind, all this kind of waste and charred retina, I should say, because all the outer layers are kind of enmeshed into each other, and there is no differentiation whatsoever in the healed areas of the outer retinal layers. This is the left eye. Haze is considerable because of vitritis, and this is again considerable thinning in these areas, and there are some active areas in between. So this is a comparison of the 3 visits of the right eye, where this patient kind of looks like he has a fire that has started in his eye and is just engulfing his whole retina. And the AF also looks very much like that. And this is the left eye. So this is very similar to the Australian bushfire with these kind of pseudopodial margins. And now, honestly, I didn't know what this was. And when Mohit says I'm a dear friend, I completely agree, because I would love it that he calls me a friend, because it was because of a smart guy like him that I realized that there is something called relentless plecoid chorioretinitis, which I'd read only in the books, and I had no clue that I would see a case, because when I couldn't find anything on the infectious workup, I was just clueless about it. And that's when I called up my very smart friend, Dr. Mohit, and he told me that he probably, has seen some cases like this, and this could be the relentless variant of plecoid chorioretinopathy. And this time we went a step ahead just to rule out syphilis for good, and as expected, the TPHA was negative. We even did an FFA ICGA in this patient to kind of get more information about its characteristics. And sure enough, there were some window defects in the FA and a lot of hypofluorescent areas on the ICGA. So he was, despite his TPHA being negative, we wanted to do something for him. So we advised him to get treated like a neurosyphilis. But then he is lost to follow up again because of inter-district district travel restrictions. And the patient thinks there is some black magic done on him, and that's why he's losing vision in both his eyes. And although I don't agree with his diagnosis of black magic, I do agree that, this is really unfortunate that a young man, like a healthy young man, had to lose vision so drastically and so dramatically. And again, thanks, Mohit, for telling me what this is. And this was very interesting, and, quite. It gave me a lot of perspective about such cases, and I would really like to ask the panel how they would have managed this case, because uh, obviously we didn't do very well with this patient. So how would you have approached such a case, and what investigations would one order in the order of importance for such cases, and when would you start immunosuppression?
Thank you, Purva, for sharing that terrifically documented case, and for giving me undue credit. Thank you, and being honest enough to share a case. Everybody is very comfortable sharing success stories, I think, but as has been reiterated point in time and time again, I think we all learn from cases that, and because they tend to stick to our memory, that unfortunately don't do that well. So thank you for bringing this out. I would like to quickly go over to Dr. Ramandeep sir first for his comments on the case, and if he would have managed this case any differently.
Apurva, it's a nice case. Actually, it's all bad luck because of the COVID and so many things happening there. You know what we could have done. It's very easy to say that, but this is what we do in PGI. If the case would have presented to me, because I could see some cells in the eye. The moment I will see that this patient is not responding to the treatment, I would have done the diagnostic vitrectomy in the right eye. All right. So I would have gone for the diagnostic vitrectomy and taken the sample. I wanted to see here one thing. I wanted to see whether there is find any TB bug there. All right. If I am able to say that the gene expert something comes positive, then I would also like to know that is it a normal. I hope it's not a multi-drug resistance TB. That would be known from the samples that I would have done. And then if this all would have come negative, I would have straight away put him on immunosuppression. All right, because my worry is the other eye. This is what could have, because I would have gone for the straight away for the diagnostic vitrectomy. Moment I have seen that is crossing the foveal center in the right eye.
So how sensitive is a diagnostic vitrectomy? Even in TB, we've seen literature from PGI that it's not very sensitive. So how much of a yield would it
I think
give?
immunosuppression we could have started earlier in this patient because his Montos is negative, so it's relatively safe.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So what would be your take on Ozurdex in such a case?
So again,
Okay,
similar.
Dr. Raman.
Yeah. Ozurdex is not at all a bad idea. It is a doable thing, But if I have the facility of doing a PCR and diagnostic vitrectomy in this patient, I would have gone for that. But yes, in a COVID times where the facilities are not available, and because it's a bilateral disease, see that's my major worry. Is something happening to the both eyes?
Great, sir.
So how sensitive is a diagnostic vitrectomy for TB also? I don't know if my question was heard. There is data.
It's an adjunct.
Sir, Raman sir, we lost you for the last 20 seconds, sir.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry, repeat kar denge. Sorry,
I was just saying that it's a bilateral disease. Ozurdex is not going to take care of the both. If you give it in the one eye, you can give it in the other eye also. It'll just buying you time for you. But you have to, on the definite side, you have to treat the patient with the immunosuppression or the specific, drugs if something comes out from the.
I think we lost her a bit. If I'm gonna jump in here, sorry, and for want of time. So again, Apurva, I'm gonna take your answer that question. How sensitive is vitrectomy? Sorry, sir. Again, we lost you for about 10-15 seconds.
Yeah.
So again, how sensitive is vitrectomy for diagnosing TB uveitis? That's a broad question. It depends on what indication of uveitis you are planning the diagnostic vitrectomy for. So if you're doing it, let's say for predominantly choroidal lesions with hardly any clinically detectable vitreous cells, of course your sensitivity is going to be lower. If you're doing it, let's say for a burnt out, for sequelae of occlusive vasculitis, and most of what you're sending is old heme, or so of course the chances of you making a diagnosis there are lower. A lot of other cases, we generally don't operate patients with choroidal granulomas, big ones. We hardly ever operate patients with choroidal abscesses, in which TB might be the thing. So those are the cases which will have a lot of multibacillary disease. The load of the bug will be high. The diagnostic vitrectomy is going to be a big help. As sir's pointing out, in this patient, because your OCT also showed there were a lot of cells even in the posterior vitreous, and also when the left eye got involved. When you actually came to the brush fire, I think towards the end of your presentation, the media haze was, I think, telltale even in the fundus photo, that there was considerable intraocular inflammation for us to try and tap. It's not a guarantee or a given that would have yielded anything, but having done it earlier on, our threshold for doing diagnostics in cases which are atypical, don't fit the bill, is lower. Primarily because once you have ruled out, you can very confidently rule out masquerades. which is not the coil, which was not one of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
DDs here, but you can rule out masquerades, and you can rule out viruses, HSV, VZV, CMV, toxo, and to a large extent TB. If
Yeah.
that's ruled out, as sir said, it'll give you 10 times more confidence and conviction to start the
To
patient
start
on single or
immunosuppression.
double immunosuppression and trying to save the fellow eye. And I think also, I think here for this patient, because I'd seen this earlier, I'm just taking this opportunity to take 1 more minute on this. So I think pattern recognition is very important. The
Yeah.
brush fire, I think that video that you showed was super, because that kind of drives home the point, because it kind of spreads like that, and the area which is actually gone, that'll either heal with pigmentation or not. In your cases, it did not
It
heal with
didn't.
exuberant pigmentation, but they'll be like a leading edge, which will look a lot more yellower, which will look elevated as compared to the area which is actually gone. And you could have multifocal areas of it. If you
Yeah.
were to do optos, you could have islands, so you can have multifocal areas with lots of focality within it. And that's why when they describe the relentless plecoid variety, they said you can have up to 50, more than 50 lesions
50
in one eye,
lesions.
which might coalesce later on. And quite frankly, if you don't target it very early, very aggressively with steroids, high dose along with immunosuppression, and that too, they have shown that and that's why they coined the term relentless plecoid, because it's relentless even on steroids. The moment you start to taper, it'll come back, it'll progress. It sometimes it might not respond just to steroids. You might need to add intraocular steroids. People have added triamcinolone, just case reports to it. People have gone as far as going on to saying that we give straight away we go on to TNF alpha blockers, and that's what takes care of it. So typically things like these which don't these will so if you recognize the pattern, I think it's very important to start immunosuppression early and tell the patient you might need a second immunosuppressive agent, akin to what you might do when you see a Behçet's patient. So this is
Right.
one of those varieties of non-infectious posterior uveitis. Luckily for us, not that common. Serpiginous is one of the variants of serpiginous choroiditis, which is multifocal, mimics intraocular infection, can have exuberant vitreous involvement, has the chances of involving the fovea, because again it'll just keep on going because you're not treating it right. And every time you look at the patient, you feel it's infective, you keep treating for infection and kind of hold your hand as far as the adequate double immunosuppression is concerned. It might be needed sometimes. And once you do that, these people do very well. You could also treat with intravitreal triamcinolone or methotrexate, but they need more than one immunosuppressive agent and hit it hard early. And people have, as I said, recommended TNF alpha blockers for it.
Mm.
So that would be my
Can
take on.
I add
Sir,
something here as a non-uveitis person?
sir.
Yeah. So Apurva, a very nice case. I mean, whenever we get such cases, I mean, you did the right thing. After applying your mind, keeping open your differential diagnosis, taking other opinions, and that's what I did. As soon as I got your case yesterday, I immediately passed it on to my colleagues here, Mudit Tyagi and Soumya Basu. Before I come to their perspective, what typically as soon as I saw this case, I mean, apart from tuberculosis, I felt that syphilis was probably also high on my differentials.
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, second guessing is always easier, but I would always consider that in our part of the world nowadays we are diagnosing more and more syphilis cases also. So, and VDRL, and whenever I'm suspecting a syphilitic chorioretinitis, I go straight away for TPHA rather than just VDRL. We don't have to go into the details of why we are doing that.
Right.
But then, based on both Soumya Basu's and Mudit's, they just glanced through briefly when I shared it with them. Both of them felt that tubercular etiology is probably higher up than syphilis in this case for various reasons. I had they have made some slides also. I could, but I think due to lack of time, I may not be going into all the details. But they are shown what are the differences, putting side by side of a syphilitic versus a tubercular. What is the autofluorescence difference? The sharp edge of the autofluorescence, which you are seeing with a nice ring around the pigmentation on autofluorescence, that typically goes in favor of a tubercular or a non-syphilitic etiology. But still, TPHA, even if you are suspecting high, they have had an experience where they got it from another lab, and that came out to be positive for TPHA, and they gave penicillin, and the patient improved very well. Now, before we go on to immunosuppressants, we must make sure that we have ruled out tuberculosis or even syphilis to the extent that we can do. In that context, we have discussed about PCR on a vitreous sample. I would go even further to the extent of taking a chorioretinal biopsy in these cases if we have a very high suspicion of, let's say, tuberculosis, if the yield of vitreous is going to be less. As Mohit mentioned, that it depends on what kind of presentation they have. But yes, in such cases, if we really want to say that now this is non-infectious, I will go straight to immunosuppression, then a chorioretinal biopsy is worth doing it, and say that, okay, I have done everything possible to rule out, and then going straight for high-end immunosuppression in this case. But overall, I would say that this is a very nice case where we have to take opinions, and opinions first time may not be right, the second time opinion may come something different, a third opinion may be coming. What we are seeing is not uncommon in uveitis in these kind of cases. But absolutely agree with this approach of, unfortunately, patient due to COVID could not come frequently, but we would have
Okay.
gone that way, what you have done so far.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for the